eavesdropping on your communication, all right? Important and valuable stuff. But what DNSSEC gives you is that your customers, your people coming to your site, know that they're actually getting to your website. One of the really unfortunate things about certificates, and although my fine friends over here at PIR had a very nice slide showing different browsers show your certificates in different ways, and all of that's a true thing. In fact, it's part of the problem. I mean, there's just no universal treatment of those things, although they all tend to change colors now when you get it. Behind the scenes, there are hundreds of certification authorities from which you can get your certificate, and they are not created equal. And the browsers are just kind of beholden to that. So they're going to show you green and you're at the right place. But whether or not everything matches is a second order problem that's actually not dealt with effectively at the browsers. And DNSSEC will actually help you with that as an incidental step. And we're hoping to see more of that going on and more people to take advantage of that. And DANE is the one thing which I mentioned here. DANE is a recent protocol that the IETF just produced, the Internet Standards Body. DNS authenticated named entities. It depends. It requires DNSSEC. And what's the relationship there? It's a way in which you can tightly couple certificates to DNSSEC with a single root. And it's the future of secure services on the internet. Okay. All of this is new. It's up and coming. We're hoping that it helps drive DNSSEC a little bit more, but we'll see. It's something you should at least be asking for and be thinking about and watch for when it comes around. So the next slide real quick is just a summary. I said I had 3 main messages from the beginning that I wanted to give to you, and just to bring all that back. Let's not lose sight of the fact that your domain name is your most important asset, and you need to really think about it and put some effort into how you're going to manage that, and be careful about that. The second thing is there are some things you can do today. The multi-factor authentication and different email addresses for your contact information, these are they're inexpensive, they're no-cost options. And I've talked about a few other things that you can do. They're one-time things. You do them, such a good deal. And they'll help you. They do create another bar that protect your domain name and your services and what you're doing. And then lastly, just to think in general, embrace security. You really do need to be paying attention to that as time goes on, or hope that you get yourself a consultant and a service provider who pays attention to these things and builds this kind of stuff out for you. DNSSEC is a critical thing that we all need. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out to you that might be one of the top #1 security technologies for you to be watching for and to ask for and to go get in the community at large. One last slide here, which is references. I just leave this for the future. You can look at it. Everything that I've said here is in those documents. The Security and Stability Advisory Committee in ICANN, we produce a lot of excellent documentation, very reachable, very readable documentation. You can take these documents out and look at the executive summary and get an awful lot out of them. The first one, in fact, measures to protect your domain registration services, is actually offered in 8 languages. So it's really approachable for people, and it was designed for target audiences such as this target audience. But you can get a lot of value out of those documents. And then the last slide is questions. That's it. Thank you.
Just a moment. First of all, James, I think that was an outstanding presentation, and I can tell you, it's not the last time you did that. And during the presentation, we had actually some standing ovations online with people listening to it and saying that's one of the greatest things. It's basic, straight to the point, and that's actually what everybody needs. People need solutions. There are problems, and these were concrete, straightforward solutions. And I would recommend to put that onto the OnGood website too, because that's what people are asking for. So, questions?
Yeah,
Laurie.
I have one question about DNSSEC. What is the extra cost to the registrant to employ DNSSEC? If I ask for it when I buy my new .ong, presumably that's available, how much extra will that cost me?
So on the retail side, it's really up to the registrar. And so we don't really have any control over that. I can say that, PIR as a leader in all this for .org in particular does not charge extra for DNSSEC. When we partnered with them to launch DNSSEC in .org back in 2009, which actually, by the way, was before the root was signed. We were leaders in all of this and making all this happen. It was all set up as a no-cost option. That tends to be what I'm seeing in the market. If you look around for TLDs and even the country codes, for the most part, the countries are not charging for the registry service for DNSSEC, for that side of it, because there is a piece that the registries are responsible for. It's really up to the DNS provider, and in that context, for most people, your registrar is your DNS provider, and so they may or may not put it in there. There is some real cost to deploying DNSSEC for a registrar. I mean, even if you do it all in software, you still have to integrate it all, and you got to put it together. Nowadays, there's a lot of free tools. There's a lot of free software out there, so registrars can go grab that, and they could actually do it. There's a little bit of investment in people time to integrate it, but whether or not they charge for that. There are a few out there that don't charge a lot. They add on security services and they toss in. For example, one model is GoDaddy actually has a pretty good model. They have a security service, so they have an add-on that you can add to any domain name that you buy, and it's just security services. They have a bundle of a number of things. It turns out DNSSEC is just in there, so you don't actually call it out separately in that context.
David.
You just kind of answered one of my questions. I was going to ask you if DNSSEC is complicated or difficult to add on to a standard to a standard registration from a commercial registrar like GoDaddy, but kind of answered that. And the second part of that question is, if there's additional costs borne out by deploying DNSSEC, are any of those, weighed against the risk mitigation? If you're a registrar, anything that happens, any security breaches that happen from not using DNSSEC that wouldn't have happened might weigh against that, right?
Well, let me answer your question with just making two comments. I mean, it might not be a direct answer to your question. The first thing is security in general is a risk management problem, right? So you typically don't get a direct return on investment in doing something securely and protecting yourself. It's really about buying insurance for what can happen to you if you don't do it, all right? So you want to have DNSSEC because you want to make sure that your customers know that the domain name is really yours. You really need the browsers to be checking that. You really need for your email to go to the right place. And with DNSSEC, you can protect all of those services and all of those indexes into all of that. And that's a good thing. So the question that you have to ask yourself more generally is, what's the value to me in that stuff going to the wrong place if the wrong thing happens? If you're a very large multinational corporation like Microsoft and Apple, and even since we're in the U.S. here, Comcast as an ISP, their name, you're going to do everything that you can to protect that Comcast.net and Microsoft.com and Apple.com and those kinds of things. No expenses spared in that respect, because there's a lot of money at stake here if something happens to that name. So, which brings me to the second comment that I would make. One of the problems that DNSSEC has is the fact that is partly that risk management insurance. Nobody likes to buy insurance unless they have to. Okay, so you always have to think about that. But the DNS works. And what's interesting is we've had 3 decades of the DNS kind of just working, and it always works. So as an individual buying a domain name, for the most part, it's hard for me to drive a motivation for wanting to put DNSSEC out there. Which is why my opinion is, and the opinion that we try to portray, and I say we, on the part of Affiliates, as we put this forward, is DNSSEC is one of those things which should be part of the infrastructure. It should always just be there. It shouldn't be something that you have to ask for and you've got to drive for it and go to get. If you start from the premise and accept the premise that DNS, everything depends on the DNS, it is an absolutely critical piece of infrastructure. And if you think about it, you can't do anything on the internet without the DNS, then it just seems perfectly right that you should have DNSSEC. I mean, why is there even any discussion about it? And yet there is, because it was an add-on to the original DNS. It wasn't there originally for a variety of historical reasons, not worth going into here. But it's an investment to add to it and to put it out there. And so now you have the whole businesses choosing whether or not they want to get involved in that and whether or not they should charge for it. And so you get into this balancing act of, can I charge customers for it? Well, I don't want to develop it unless I'm going to be able to sell it. Well, nobody's asking for it, so I'm not going to develop it because I'm not going to be able to sell it. So it's not really a satisfying answer to your question.
In order to generate a consensus around that, can you do what politicians do and just scare the hell out of people?
You know, if what we see on the internet today and all of the threats and the vulnerabilities and, you know, the actions that happen, it's a wonder that, you know, security is not a bigger deal, that we don't pay more attention to it.
Only after something goes wrong.
Yeah, it's only after some, and even after it goes wrong, we still don't do better. You know, I mean, multi-factor authentication has been around for a couple of decades, even before the internet was the internet. And it's been used in appropriate places for the right thing. Now we can do all kinds of multi-factor authentication, even in software, and using your cell phone, so your mobile phone as one piece of it, you know. And yet people still don't do it, you know, and we don't embrace it.
It's a great,
So I don't know what the answer is, you know.
it's a great topic to explore further.
Yes.
Any more questions? I only have one comment to say. I always say, just imagine the DNS would be run by a government or organization. How many downtimes we would have had in the last 30 years?
You know, it was an excellent presentation. I guess my only question is that when you say it's an add-on, whether it's you could add where you could ask the registry. Could I add on DNSSEC, and is it a cost-free add-on, or what do you charge for it? And is that what questions you would ask?
Yes, you should ask. The thing to keep in mind is that the way that this all built up, right, is registrars, yes, they provided registrations and they sell domain names, but everything else that they do, they kind of bundled DNS. DNS and email was sort of that bundled service that they gave everybody for buying a domain name. Is part of the issue. So we've built up a business model that doesn't automatically provide for DNSSEC, because really what they're trying to do is sell you all the other services that they have. And there's nothing wrong with that business model, it's just where we are in the state of things. You should ask for DNSSEC. Whether or not they will add it to their DNS services is you know, up to them and their own business choices and the way that they do it. I will only observe that DNS is a bundled service with a registrar. You always have the option of going specifically to a DNS service provider, okay? And because there are those that deal in that business. In fact, Affiliates, as a separate service, we offer a managed DNS service. And you know, you could, instead of using your registrar for your DNS service, come to a different service provider. We're one example of one, but there are, you know, dozens of them out there that will sell you DNS services, and then you can get DNSSEC from them directly. You know, use it that way if you can't find a registrar. You just need to find a registrar that will work with your DNS provider.
Thank you very much. If there are no any further questions, allow me just to close the session here in these 2 minutes. What I want to say is, first of all, at the end of the third event here in DC, we will take a slight break of about 2 months here in DC, and the next events will be about intellectual property and trademark in the DNS. But and the next events as Pathfinder itself will be in Brussels and Geneva, and you will all hear about it. But I want to say, first of all, a very big thanks to the Washington ISOC chapter and David Fjost and Paul Prickner, who helped to make all that possible. I want to say a huge thanks to Brian Winterfeld and his team from Mayor Brown, who basically provided the room and the food. I want to say thanks to the sponsors like PIR, ICANN, and we will hope to see you soon again. One thing what will change in Pathfinder is that we will try to have now more events where actually we go to people and not people have to come to us. That means we will try to have more presentations, more sessions from conferences, meetings, and things like that, so that we get a little bit more bandwidth and a little bit more impact. But I really don't regret the 3 sessions here in Washington, because besides that we have brilliant material which a lot of people will watch, we also learned a lot, and that is for me as important than everything. So thank you everybody for coming, participating. Thank you.
Okay, take food.
I was, but I don't remember. But it was very difficult.
Yeah. I was kind of downstairs. I was trying to.
That was really interesting. It was really accessible. Thank you. The question I had was, you mentioned, you referenced like another, like an